Damn, Alchemist, it's getting pretty hot in here. Is that you or me or oh no, it's just all these fire cards that we're going to be putting on a tier list today. Quill's favorite element, we're going to talk about all the spicy little options we have for fire spirits in Moonstone Island. As always, this list is done in a vacuum, ignoring the other elements except for maybe neutral cards that might support this game plan. And we're going to discuss what the best options are if you want to run a fire spirit. Um, I'm going to preface this by saying that fire has some good game plans. Their multi-hit stuff is pretty cool. They got lots of good direct damage. But for various reasons, I don't really respect the burn game plan. Compared to poison, the burn cards are more energy efficient in the amount of stacks they apply, but because the fire stacks fall off half at a time instead of one at a time, and the amplification cards aren't as powerful, and the lack of a rib bite equivalent, there's just a lot of stuff that stops the burn plan from working out in the way that poison does. And if you're a fan of burn plans, you're not going to be happy where most of those cards end up on this list. But luckily, we don't have to talk about that quite yet because we're starting out with Blaze Plus. Blaze Plus, 3 mana, 3 energy card, no real significant modifiers, just 3x power fire damage to all enemies. So that's fine. That's to all enemies means that it ends up being relatively mana efficient. That's 9 damage total against 9 times power damage total against, 3 enemies. And then against 2 enemies, it's 6, which is a little less good. And against 1 enemy, it's only 3, which is pretty horrible. We're going to put this in the B tier. It's just a fine AoE option. It's not particularly efficient. The unupgraded version just does it to 1 enemy instead of AoE, so that upgrade's particularly valuable. Yeah, just a fine average AoE option. Nothing special, but hey, it's better than the next card, Burn Plus. 1 energy, 2x power burn, remove 2 armor. As usual, these remove armor cards that don't scale fall off very quickly, and this is a burn card. 2x power burn means that on the application it's more efficient than Poison Plus was. But Poison Plus, alright, let's say you had 10 power. You played the card on the first turn, it was 10 damage. On the second turn, it was 9 damage. On the third turn, it was 8 damage. Over 3 turns, that's a total of 27 damage. Burn Plus, same thing. It's 20 power, 10 power, you do 20 burn, you do 10 burn, you do 5 burn, and it's 35 over the 3 turns. That's more, right? Well, yeah, if you just played the card. But, burn has accelerant, poison has accelerant, poison has purify poison, whereas burn only has 1 option for amplification, and it isn't quite as good. And, when you got the poison up, 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 you could maintain hundreds or thousands of poison over the course of several turns, whereas the burn falls off half at a time. So, you have to get the numbers really absurd to do the same kind of work. I'm not going to call this a bad D tier card, but I think it falls into the C tier just because the supporting structure around it isn't as good as the poison options. Alright. Explode Plus. Deal 8x power fire damage to 1 target and yourself. 0 energy, no other modifiers. So the downside's pretty obvious. You nuke yourself just as hard as you nuke your enemies. So what are the upsides? You can plan around this, right? If you design your spirit in such a way that you survive the hit, you can design a spirit that benefits from this. That's a pretty big ask in a lot of situations. You have to very carefully balance out the. Does 8 times power. The scaling of health to points isn't quite linear. It kind of like accelerates every time. The first health point is worth a certain amount, and the second health point is worth a little bit more, and the third health point's a little bit more. So in the early game, it's almost impossible to get this to line up right. But the higher level your spirits are, the easier this gets, and eventually you're probably just going to get to the point where your own spirits survive, and then this becomes an incredibly efficient damage card. You're going to want to build some heal into your deck or carry some healing items, so this might be good with a support water spirit or just with a bunch of strong healing concoctions. We're going to call this an A-tier game plan. It's pretty strong if you build around it. It takes a lot of work, but that gets easier and easier the later in the game you get, and you can do some stupid stuff with this towards the end game. Yeah. Moving down the list, we're going to take a look at Fire Breath. 2 energy, deal 1.5x fire damage to a random enemy 5 times. So for 2 energy, this is 3, 4.5, 6, 7.5 times damage for 2 energy. That's pretty efficient, but it's random. If you're only against one target, it's incredible. If you're against multiple targets, the damage might not hit where you want it to hit. So you really gotta work to make this card do what you want it to do. I think it's an okay card. I used it a little bit in the mid game, but there are way better options on this list. We're gonna pop it into the. I'm not sure there's a world where I can put it quite on the same tier as Blaze Plus. Because, like, at least Blaze Plus, you know where the damage is going. This card's more efficient, but less reliable. We're gonna put it in there in the B tier with it. I think that's fine. It'll go distinctly below it, I think. Just because, you don't know exactly where that damage is going. But if you manipulate the situation, get it down to a couple creatures, you can make the gamble on this. And then if you get it down to one creature, this is a consistent damage. This gets better the longer the fight goes. So this might be a card that you kind of just hold on to for a little while. It's a shame it doesn't have Retain. I think Retain would do a lot of work for this card. Next on the list is the Hidden Secret Fire card. Firestorm. 0.25x power burn to a random enemy 10 times. So it ends up being 2.5 times burn to random enemies for 2 energy. This is less efficient than burn was, and you can't control it. Yeah. Not really a card I can put a lot of respect on. I think we're gonna have to drop this into the D tier. It's less efficient than burn. It exhausts itself, so you can't even like consistently play it. It's a 5-star card, so it's really rare and hard to get. I have to spend a lot of time resetting Waldo's shop or leveling up spirits. These rare hidden cards, their like appearance rate scales with the higher level your spirit is, with the maximum chance of getting them being above level 40. So like the easiest way to get these cards is to save the game with a level 40 spirit, level them up like 5 times, try for the card. If you don't get it, reload your save, try again. And this card isn't really worth that much effort. You can do way better things. We're just going to leave it right there in the D tier. Okay, Fireball Plus deals 1 times fire damage to 3 random enemies. For 1 energy, it's 3x damage to random enemies. Again, it's kind of got the same problem as Fire Breath, where it's a really efficient card that hits randomly. So, again, you can manipulate things. It's a little better, I think, because it's cheaper. It's less efficient, but it's cheaper. It's a lot less efficient, mind you. It's, you know, if this had the same energy cost, it would be 6x power, whereas Fire Breath is 7.5 times power. So I think it goes below Fire Breath for sure. But how much lower is the question? These cards benefit well with an energy support with charge. And again, if you're down to a single target, they're pretty good. But I think it's going to end up here in the C tier. This is going to kind of be a pattern with the fire cards. There's a couple of really good cards in here. But I think that compared to the other elements, fire's kind of lacking in identity. And the identities that it does have just aren't things that resonate with me. They have really efficient cards that are random, or really efficient cards that burn, but you know, you're giving a lot up to the randomness, and burn is just so inferior to poison that if you want to do I know, again, the mentality of this has always been to ignore the other elements, but I just can't help comparing it to the raw efficiency of poisoning when I look at this stuff. Because at the end of the day, it's just not a reliable game plan. You have to get the amplification cards in your hand like immediately to make burn work. But none of this has anything to do with Fireball Plus. We should have talked about this while talking about the next card on the list, Fan Flames. 1 energy, exhausts, double all enemies burn. So, it's an AoE amplification, unlike the single target amplification of Accelerate or Purify, but it's just so much less efficient. It's just you double it instead of tripling or octupling. Mind you, the fact that it's AoE means I guess you could argue that it's 6xing the burn that exists, but having burn on a bunch of random enemies is way less good than having it condensed on 1 enemies, because you want to melt down 1 target at a time in this game. You don't want to be spreading your damage disparately against all your foes. You want to be locked in, funneling down, eliminating targets. There are some fights, like the last boss, it's really the only one I can think of, where there's constantly spawning enemies, and I guess the temple bosses too, where you might want to do things down evenly to avoid dealing with waves of spawning enemies and burning resources. So I guess this AoE stuff is good in those 5 specific fights. But at the end of the day, I don't put much respect on burn. You play this card, you double the burn, and then next turn, the burn gets cut in half. And you've lost all the work that this card did into the C tier with burn. Okay, I think the next one is Waldo. No. Sorry, I gotta take a look at this. This is Flame Feed, I believe. Yes. Flame Feed Plus. Remove all of target's burn, regain that much HP, and then the unupgraded version is half their target's burn and regain that much HP. It's a card with burn on it. With the word burn on it. I think it tops out at the C tier. And this isn't as good as the poison equivalent option, because again, you're already losing half of your burn every single turn. So if you play the unupgraded version, which is probably the one you want to play, you cut it in half immediately, and then the next turn it does its damage and gets cut in half again. It goes down to a quarter of what you applied. You're just losing efficiency on the burns so fast. D tier. There's better healing plans in poison. There's better healing plans in water. I don't have much good in the way to say on the burn plan. Yeah. Sorry. Moving on to Flamethrow Plus, and finally, in S tier, Fire card. Deals 1.5x fire damage 4 times, draw 2 cards for 2 energy. So this ends up being 6x power damage for 2 energy. So twice as efficient as a tackle. And then you draw 2 cards. It just does everything. It's the most reliable fire damaging card. It comes in with built-in card draw. Because it hits 4 times instead of 1 hit, it benefits greatly from a charge game plan. Just an excellent card. We're happy to see it. Finally, a showing option in Fire. Honestly, if you're running a Fire Spirit, probably the best deck possible is just 8 Flamethrow Pluses. It's just that good. It just does everything you need it to do. It's consistent. It cycles. You might need to run a little bit of energy cheat on one of your other spirits to fuel it, but honestly, if you're just playing one Flamethrow a turn and then like another card from one of your other spirits, that's an okay turn. You get to fish for more options for what that other card ends up being, and if you are running energy cheat in the deck, it just enables you to continue rolling on through your deck and doing greater and greater things. We love this card. A card that we don't love quite as much is Flaming Fist. 2 energy, deal damage equal to double target's burn. So if this was 1 energy, I might call this like a good payoff for the burn plan. But it's 2 energy, and you already have to spend so much of your energy getting the burn up. If you're not running energy cheat, you can't even do burn, fan flame, flaming fist. Instead you could do burn, flaming fist. So burn does 2x times your power burn, and then flame fist does double that, so 4x power damage, and then their turn ticks by and they take the 2x damage, so they take a total of 6x damage for 3 energy. It's the same damage that Flamethrower would have done for 2 cards and 1 more energy. That's really all I gotta say about that. Again, one of the better burn cards, but it's a card with burn on it. It caps out at the C tier. Sorry. That's just kind of how it is with the burn plan. This is probably going to be my most controversial. I'm sure there's people that put more respect on the burn plan than I do. I'm kind of breaking my rule of doing these in a vacuum when I keep comparing it to poison. But the fact that it falls off by half every turn means that you don't get the stacking game long efficiency that poison does. And you can't even do the crazy burst because it doesn't have like the good single target amplification. It just hurts. It just hurts. I love condition damage in RPGs and card games. I would always rather do like, stacking ticking damage than just doing big crits. Doing the setup feels really personally satisfying to me. And it kind of hurts in my heart and soul that the burn plan is this mediocre. So I might be undervaluing these cards just because, it hurts me spiritually that they're not as good as I want them to be. It might be possible that these are B tier cards that I'm maligning. But, argue with me about it down in the comments, I guess. Moving on to another card that has nothing to do with the burn plan that I can put a little more respect on. Flint Plus. Well, not that much more respect, if I'm being honest. 2 energy, deals 2x power fire damage, draw 2 cards, and retain. The retain is nice if you don't need cards this turn. You can hold on to it, and it can help you fish in a future turn, so there's a little bit of deck fixing there. But it's just the same energy cost as Flamethrow. It draws the same amount of cards. It does a quarter, or third rather, I'm sorry, bad math, of the damage. And it doesn't multi-hit, so it doesn't scale with charge. So it's just, other than that retain, it's just kind of inferior to Flamethrow in any way. But that retain gives it some value. We're going to put it in the A tier. It's not efficient for the amount of damage it does, but it's decent card draw, and you can hold on to it until you need that card draw. And that has value. That's good, reliable deck fixing, and we respect it. I could see running a one of these in the deck just to hold on for a risky turn. Of course, again, that's only if you're running just fire. Other elements have better, more reliable card draw, cheaper at least. But in the vacuum of the fire element, Flint Plus is a reliable little deck fixer, and we're going to leave it at that. Next on the list, we've got Overheat Plus. 1 energy card deals 3x power damage. Hey, twice as efficient as Tackle. Look at that. Look at that. Receive half the damage as burn. Oh. So, you do 3x power damage to an enemy. You take 1.5x power damage yourself. And the next turn you take 0.75 damage. And the turn after that you take whatever half that is, 0.35 something with a remainder. You get the point. It's a card that does reliable damage, but with a pretty hefty downside. You end up doing not quite the same amount of damage to yourself, but a little bit less, but it's delayed. I think I have to put it in the same tier as Explode. You don't hurt yourself as much as you do with Explode, but it's not as efficient as Explode. You don't do as much damage. And Explode's free. So I think it goes... Huh. No, I don't think it can go in the same tier. I think it tops off the B tier. If you can do something with the burn... Actually, you know what? I think this card might justify the existence of Feed Flame. Hold on. Because you can cast Feed Flame on your own targets. I didn't think about that when I was talking about Flame Feed, actually. Okay. I'm not going to move it yet. I'm going to wait till the adjusting part so that, people can get to it with timestamps. I think this actually might justify the existence of Flame Feed a little bit more. It might be enough to bump Flame Feed up to the C tier. Because you play this card, you do 3x damage to an enemy, and then you pop the Flame Feed and you heal yourself 1.5x. It's a pretty cool 2-card, 1 energy combo. So respect on the name. It's still not a great card. I think it still caps out at the B tier. Yeah, I don't know. It's efficient. The self damage hurts. You need to have the Flame Feed in your hand to make it feel great, but it still feels okay. And you could play this at like the end of a fight as like a finisher card and not take the damage. Yeah, we're fine with it. Or maybe the top of the tier is a little much. Because this card's only problem is that it's random. And then yeah. I'm gonna put it there. It's got some problems, but we respect it. We respect it. It doesn't have burn on it, so we respect it. A card that we don't respect because it has burn on it is Rainfire Plus. Applies 1x power burn to random enemies 3 times. So that's 3x power burn against one enemy. That's pretty efficient. Otherwise, it's spreading them across. You could play this and then fan flames and put a decent amount of burn on someone, I guess. But, it's actually funny. It's more efficient than the flame tornado that does 2.5x burn total for 2. This is 3x burn for 1. Because this one hits 10 times, this one's got like, you know, a wider spread. There's less chance of it all just going onto one enemy. This one you could just, 1 and 3, 1 and 3, 1 and 3, all onto the same enemy, potentially. Which makes it either better or worse, depending on how you feel. Yeah, I'm gonna put it above the Flame Tornado, but still in the D tier. We don't like the burn plan in this household, and we don't like randomness in this household. So it's 2 things that we don't respect here, and that's where it goes. Next is Torch Plus. Torch Plus, 2x power fire damage for 1 energy. So it's a tackle plus. It's fine. It's better than a burn card. That's how we're gonna rank it. You play it in the early game as a consistent source of damage, and every time you get a Flamethrower plus, you delete one until your whole deck is just Flamethrower plus. Great. So moving on to the part of the list where we move things around, where we feel like we made mistakes, or when things need to get readjusted within the tiers. I think we already kind of did a good job of keeping things in the right order within the tiers. The only thing we're going to move is we're going to take this Flame Feed because of the existence of Overheat. Is that the name of this card? Yeah. We're going to pop this up to B tier with it. That's a little much. That's a little much. We're going to put it in the... Yeah, no, it's okay, because listen, the ideal use of this card isn't actually to do on enemies that you've burned. You actually run this card to heal your own burns, whether you take from the enemy or you apply to yourself with Overheat. So that gives it like a higher floor than all the other cards with burn on it. This might make sense only to me in my burn-hating world, but I think that's where we put it. That's the adjustment. That's all that's getting adjusted. This is the list. I don't know how you feel about this one. This is probably the list I feel the shakiest about out of all the ones we've done. I have my biases against the burn plan, which is like a majority of the fire cards contribute to. And then my other bias is against randomness, which another huge chunk of these cards do. And then a card I have in A tier nukes itself for the same amount that it does to enemies. This might seem crazy to some people. This is the one I expect the most Dissent on. So hey, tell me how wrong I am down below. I'd love to hear it. But this is how I feel about the fire cards. Great. This is it. List over. Thanks for coming and spending this time with me. I also stream on this channel if you want to see some of that. I did play Moonstone Island. You can check out the VODs and see how I came to some of these crazy conclusions. Otherwise, I'm playing lots of other games on the channel lately. I'll probably be done. I haven't even started playing Beyond Good and Evil yet, but if I'm being honest, by the time this video goes up, I'll have probably blown through that game. I think when this goes live, I'll probably be playing Anode Heart, another creature collector game. So come check that out. We can talk more about creature collectors. I might end up doing tier lists for that game too. So if you're playing it, you can maybe look forward to me making lists based on that game. And you can be part of the learning process of me coming to my conclusions about the creatures and elements and abilities and whatever else that game has. I actually don't know too much about it. So this has been Alex, Alchin, Altoon, whatever the heck you want to call me. This is my tier list. You can subscribe to the channel. You can comment down below. You can hang out with me anytime. I appreciate all of it. And hey, if this is the only time that you ever come to my channel, thanks for making it this far. My YouTube analytics say that makes you one of the very few, and that makes me appreciate you all the more. Until next time, or perhaps never again, bye-bye.